All right, let's dive in. You know, every great detective, they have a master plan, right? Well, in the world of data, that plan is everything. Today, we're going to crack open the blueprint, the secret sauce that data detectives use to solve their toughest cases. Let's do it.
And I just love how our source material puts it. This whole thing, it's a mission. It's not just some dry technical process. No, it's about strategy, about foresight, and most importantly, about choosing the exact right tools to crack the case.
So, where do we start? Well, just like any good investigation, it all begins with a mission briefing. Before our data detective even thinks about looking for clues, they have to know exactly what they're up against. They've got to understand the case, inside and out.
And that brings us right to the heart of it, the model planning phase. Now, the key thing to get here is that we're not actually building anything yet, not a single thing. This is all about strategy. It's the team, gathered around a whiteboard, mapping everything out, figuring out how they're going to tackle the mystery, way before anyone writes a single line of code.
And just to put this into perspective, if the last phase, data prep, was all about cleaning your tools, getting them shiny and ready, well, this phase is about deciding which tools you're even going to pack for the mission, right? You wouldn't bring a shovel when you really need a sieve. It's all about making that critical choice right up front.
Okay, so how does a data detective actually do this? How do they craft this master plan? Well, it's definitely not guesswork. It's a really methodical, 6-step process that makes sure nothing gets missed. So let's break down exactly what that looks like.
So here they are, the 6 critical steps for the blueprint. We start with some big picture thinking, identifying possible models, figuring out what kind of data we even have. Then we start to narrow it down, making sure we're aligned with the main goals, and finally we zero in on the variables that really matter. Let's walk through them one by one. All right, first up, identifying candidate models. Think of these as your main detective techniques. So are we trying to group a bunch of suspects together? That sounds like clustering. Or maybe we're trying to label a piece of evidence. Is it this or is it that? That's classification. The idea is to just make a short list of all the possible approaches that could solve our mystery. Step 2 is super important. It's all about understanding your evidence. Do you have structured data? Neat, organized clues in a spreadsheet. Or is it unstructured data? Just a messy pile of emails, videos, and social media posts. Because the kind of clues you have totally changes the tools you can use to solve the case. Step 3, man, this is the ultimate reality check. You can build the most amazing, complex model in the world, but if it doesn't actually solve the original problem, what's the point? It's useless. And this sounds so obvious, right? But it's a classic trap. Teams get so excited about the cool tech that they totally forget the question they were supposed to answer in the first place. Every single decision has to tie back to that main goal. And I love this for explaining step 4. Sometimes a single super powerful model is all you need. Like one superhero who can handle the job. But other times the problem is just so big and messy that you need a whole team of models working together, each with their own special power. You need the entire Avengers squad. And figuring that out early on, so important. Okay, step 5 is where our detective finally gets their hands dirty. This is where you actually start digging into the data. You're looking for patterns, you're studying how different clues might be related, checking correlations. You're really just getting a feel for what the data is trying to tell you. It's all about building your intuition before you even start building the model itself. And that leads us perfectly into step 6, selecting the important variables. Now, a variable is really just a fancy word for a clue you're tracking. And this whole step is about one thing, separating the signal from the noise. If you're trying to predict ice cream sales, the temperature outside is a huge clue, right? But the number of squirrels in the park? Yeah, probably not so much. A great detective knows exactly what evidence to follow and, just as important, what to ignore. Of course, our data detective isn't doing all this with just a magnifying glass and a notepad. Oh no. They've got a whole toolkit packed with powerful, high-tech gadgets to help them build that perfect plan. So let's take a look inside that toolkit. You've got your programming languages like R and Python. Think of those as your all-purpose forensic kits. Then you've got stuff like SQL, which is perfect for interrogating your databases, asking them questions. And for the really big cases, you bring out the heavy machinery, like Apache Spark. That's for when your crime scene has millions and millions of pieces of evidence. Every single tool has its own special job to do.
Okay, so we've seen what this is and how it's done, but let's talk about the why. Why is this planning phase so incredibly important? Why is it the key to the whole project's success?
This quote from the source just hits the nail on the head. It's the blueprint before building the house.
I mean, think about it. You would never start building a house without a detailed blueprint, right? It would be total chaos. You'd waste a ton of money and end up with something that just falls apart. Well, it's the exact same thing with a data model.
When you have a solid plan, a good blueprint, everything just clicks into place. It makes sure you've picked the right model for the job. It makes sure that model is actually aimed at the real business goal. It confirms your data is ready to go. And it stops your team from getting sidetracked by those useless clues. Basically, it keeps the whole mission on track.
All right, let's wrap this all up with a quick mission debrief. Think of this as your final cheat sheet. The key things you absolutely need to remember. So, let's recap. First, model planning is phase 3. Second, the whole thing is about strategy, picking the right model for the job. You've got to evaluate your data structure and always align with the main goals. Then, you explore that data and pick out the most important variables. And of course, you use awesome tools like R, Python, and Spark to pull it all off.
Look, if you take away just one thing from all this, let it be this. Model planning is where the strategy is born. Everything that comes next, all the cool model building, the testing, the launch, all of it depends on the quality of the plan you make right here. Honestly, this is where the case is won or lost, way before you even start building the final model.
So that leaves us with a pretty exciting question, doesn't it? The blueprint is drawn, the strategy is set. So, what happens next? What happens when the real investigation finally begins and our data detectives pick up their tools for real? We'll have to save that for the next one.